Ladies and gentlemen, two leading lights of the Indian judicial system. Let me start by telling you a little bit about both of them, and let me start by talking to you a little bit about Justice Hema Kohli. It's not a usual story. Unlike Geeta Luthra, who has a legacy of law and comes from a family that has been kind of drawn from the judicial system, Justice Hema Kohli didn't have any connections to the world of the judiciary or to law itself. Let me start by asking you, what made you want to go down this path, Justice Kohli?
To be honest, I started after doing my post-graduation and graduation in history, had thought that perhaps UPSC would be a way forward, because from where I come, my college and university, most of my contemporaries were taking the exams and were preparing for them. I was not very charmed halfway house. So though I took my prelims and cleared it, I decided not to go ahead with that career option. And since I thought a library was imperative for me to have access to all the kind of books for which you needed preparation in UPSC, I decided to enroll myself in the Campus Law Center in Delhi University, and never realizing that it'll open new doors for me. And that's how my journey began, because once I got interested in law, I didn't look back.
You didn't look back, and you went all the way to the top.
Right.
For those of you who are not aware of just how her trajectory has played out, she was the first woman Chief Justice of the Telangana High Court and the first woman judge from the Delhi High Court to be elevated to the Supreme Court of India, and only the 9th in the history of the Supreme Court of India. So it's bittersweet, isn't it, Justice Kohli, that you made it to the Supreme Court, but we only have 9 of you at the apex court. Take me through why you believe that's the case today.
Shall we say that when I entered the stream, probably there were very few women who chose to get into the legal practice and sustain themselves. Sustenance is imperative, because that attrition rate in our generation of lawyers was huge. Most of the women, for various reasons, and I'm not blaming anybody, but the situations were such, and some circumstances related to finances too, would move out, would look for a regular 9-to-5 job rather than the career options of a tough legal profession where you didn't know where your next case was coming from or whether it was coming at all. So it was important for one to sustain oneself. And if you could sustain yourself in the profession and be there all the time, probably then people knew you were serious. They took you equally seriously. That applies to the court as well. When you're in court and you're seen in the smallest of matters, the bigger ones come your way too. It takes time. And once that is established, then it's one thing into the other. And that's how one builds one's career. And then perhaps ultimately be invited to the bench when you think that you've made a mark for yourself and others think so. It's important. And if they think so too, that's how you get invited to the bench, and the rest is sometimes I don't say that one should underplay it. Your hard work has to be supported with a lot of destiny, as also the backup of a family that has to stand strong behind you. In the absence of a good backup, it's very tough to be a first-generation lawyer, a woman in an all-male practice, and be able to make a mark for yourself. So I give a lot of credit to it, to my family.
No, absolutely. I think the support system and the support system kicking in at the right points in time and right points in your journey, absolutely critical. Geeta Luthra, as I pointed out, your father has been part of the fraternity, as is your brother. But for you specifically, we've grown up listening to the homily of justice being blind. But is that really the case in practice when we talk about women in the judiciary?
So, not at all. So, I was 7 years old when I would be taking snippets of my father's interviews. Those days there used to be an evening news by Karanjia, R.K. Karanjia of Bombay. And that evening news was carrying all the legal news, because the whole day's legal news used to be there. I used to be very excited taking out little cutouts of...
As a 7-year-old?
As a 7-year-old. And because of that, I said, I want to be a lawyer. Of course, my father didn't. You know, the way if you were a bright lawyer person, you should do the IAS, you should do the services. Why will you do law? And my father was absolutely opposed. My mother said, well, if she has a dream, but he said there are no lawyers. You know, women are not lawyers. That's it. Women weren't lawyers when we started. And there were one or two lawyers who hadn't made a mark or had made a mark for the wrong reasons. So all the more for a father who was protective. So you know the difference between me and my brother was this. My father would start whispering in my ear at 3 o'clock, why don't you go home? Why don't you go home? The driver will drop you. And I mean, obviously for a boy, you wouldn't think that.
Yeah.
You say, hey, you're working till 7, work till 10. But you know, the whole ethos, you have to work and be determined that this is what you want. So this is what I wanted. So I, of course, did the same thing. I cleared the prelims. And then I got admission to Cambridge after law. My father said, you'll do the finals. And I said, no, I'm going to Cambridge and I'm continuing law. So he said, you'll fly back, you do the exam, then you go. I said, no way, I'm getting caught in this trap. So I think the professions, even today, and today we have 50% of the pass-outs being women. So it's changed so drastically. And the number of people that would fall off in the profession in the first 2 or 3 years, because it's a tough profession. It really is tough. You're giving up a lot just to keep pursuing in a profession where women maybe not even today, they are not even today treated as if they are equal. For example, I may do a lot of criminal law, but clients are somehow
We'll come to you with divorce cases.
somehow clients feel that you can do intellectual property, you can do matrimonial, you can do others, but criminal law, let's think about it. So you have to fight that battle. And that battle is your lone battle. Families are support, but it is a battle because obviously your parents, everybody, the support system is very important, but the battle becomes your battle because you can give in any part of the way.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. If you can just hold the mic closer to you, Geeta.
Sorry.
Justice
Sorry.
Kohli, you know, I remember you saying that you need to be tougher. Women judges need to be tougher because they face more difficulties in the judiciary. Why did you say that? And what kind of difficulties do women as judges face and women as lawyers, as litigators face? How are the two different?
So, as again, as I don't need to elaborate on that. When you're a woman practitioner, the invitation to the bench is in 2 routes. One is as a practicing lawyer, you're invited to the bench, and the other is on promotion from the district court. One is invited to the bench. One gets promoted over a period and gets qualified to come on the bench. So when you're a woman lawyer, somehow all the time it is important for you to keep proving yourself. Every matter is a challenge because there are others looking at you and thinking you won't succeed each time and every time. It doesn't happen to individuals because let's be clear, when individuals come to you, they come to you with faith that you'll be delivering. When it comes to the corporate sector, public sector undertakings, government undertakings, it's easier to come on a panel of a government, difficult to get work. And when you get that work, the officers will measure you differently. You have to make sure and make the others understand that you are calling the shots, that you are thoroughly prepared, that you are ready to deliver in court. That confidence has to be instilled each time in the litigant who comes from these sectors. The individual will be much easier to handle because he or she will come through a reference point. and their faith in you will build over a time. But these matters are of different nature. So each time you are appearing in court, you have all those people waiting in the back and watching you to see when do you falter.
Are they actually waiting for you to
Some
fail?
of them do, because there is always some kind of competition and rivalry, and I would say it's healthy. It builds on you. It gives you the confidence to know. Let's not forget, it's not easy to be a lawyer. When you are appearing before a judge, it's a matter is between you and the judge. But there are perhaps 40 pairs of eyes looking at you at the back and measuring you. So you have to live up to that each time. Because if you don't, there'll be 40 others stepping out to say somebody made a fool of herself. That's also an incentive and an impetus to do better each time. When it comes to becoming a judge, and a woman judge, fortunately, Delhi High Court, from where I come, my parent court, had a lot of women by then who were also on the benches, also practicing lawyers. But then, the majority are men. Most of them are men. And then you have to be assertive. You have to make sure that they realize that you mean business. They can't take you lightly in court. So sometimes it's a veneer, but you have to be tough. You have to be tough to make sure that nobody takes the court for a ride, not me, the individual. It is ultimately to do with the seat of the judge.
Yeah.
And that should never be taken lightly. And that seriousness in the court should be maintained. So the dignity, the decorum, and everything that goes with the court has to be kept absolutely spick and span, so to say. For which, if you have to be tough, well, it goes with the territory, I would say.
But did you deliberately change anything in the body language and the way that you spoke and so on and so forth?
It came naturally.
Yeah?
Geeta would be more of a having appeared perhaps over a period of time, but I was not known to be lax at any point when it came to discipline in my court. It had to run like absolutely in order. I wouldn't accept anything less than that, because I thought I was giving my best to a matter, and I expected the same from the lawyer or the litigant or whoever appeared before me as in a matter. That's how it is.
So Geeta, I want to talk to you about some of the landmark judgments that you've been involved with, some of the matters that you've been involved with that have actually led to transformation and have actually led to change. When something like that happens, when you win a case that you know will have far-reaching consequences and far-reaching impact, take me through some of those moments when you felt like you've made a difference with the work that you've done. What has been one of the most defining moments for you in court?
So this would be, a difficult question, because over the period of time, there are many defining moments. There are defining moments when you get, for example, when I did a matter in the Delhi High Court where we wanted rights for transgenders in government and particularly in paramilitary employment. And we won that matter even for a single individual. It meant a lot for everyone.
Yeah.
And this poor person, just look at the grit of this person. She comes from Lucknow. She comes to fight. She has no money. And finally, by the end of it, I myself was disheartened, but became so fond of her that I said, why don't I try finding you a job in some other place than the paramilitary force which we are trying. And those are defining moments. But I think defining moments for me have been if I'm fighting for somebody's liberty or somebody's equality. I felt that, for example, in the same-sex marriage issue, marriage equality issue, I felt that perhaps in the skin-to-skin issue, which was the POCSO case, which I did, which said, if you're not really touching the skin, are you still guilty of an offense? And we succeeded in the Supreme Court. So there are many little... there are milestones which are milestones in law. It may be even a child custody case where you've got a law laid down that, look, parental alienation is bad. So I think, for me, one of the most defining moments is if I can fight for the actual sense of fairness and equality and justice for a person. And be it a small person, be it a case that makes a mark, be it a case that doesn't make a mark in the public eye, for me, that case becomes a defining case, because I feel I've fought for justice. When I fought for in Tihar, I used to go a lot to Tihar for women prisoners and juveniles. And to me, going there, I used to find it too hard to drive all the way. At that time, distances weren't so bad in Delhi. So you thought going all the way. So we used to take a 3-wheeler and go there, enter Tihar, meet all the prisoners, be with the prisoners, try and get them relief, come back. But even that was a good moment, because there were so many women who were absolutely defenseless. Things have improved over a period of time. Legal aid has come in, it's become far more definitive. Human rights have become far more stronger by courts' pronouncements. But when we went there and started going there, I think I was one of the first lawyers. And I feel those actually make you a more humane and a better person.
Not just you a more humane person, but they make the system, the judicial system, and of course civil society a lot more just and humane as well. But Justice Kohli, just to take off from what we heard there from Geeta, I remember the former Chief Justice D.Y. Chandrachud described you as a fierce protector of the rights of women. From landmark rulings that you yourself have been involved with, from maternity leave and women in the armed forces, how do you see the role of the judiciary in furthering the cause, championing the cause of women through its orders, through its judicial verdicts?
So one is to ensure that when there are fundamental rights that are enshrined in the Constitution, we keep opening doors. And we open doors by interpreting those rights within the four corners of the Constitution, but more widely, and giving those rights to those who have been deprived of it. Take, for example, the cases where only married women were permitted to go in for abortion. Now, that was interpreted by the court to mean that it is a woman and not a married woman who's entitled to do so up to the permitted period of 24 weeks. That was an interpretation given by the courts. The right of a woman to be recognized as a guardian, irrespective of whether the husband was there or not, because there were forms and forms that were filled up with expecting the male of the family to be the guardian of the child. How was it interpreted? The doors were opened wide enough to recognize that the woman was equally a natural guardian, and there was no good reason for the woman not to have filled up those forms and not to have appeared for the child or presented the child's matters anywhere. Those are things that courts do to open doors. The right to succession of women to claim property, both self-acquired and ancestral, are things that the court has done to open up. The lived realities of women must be realized and are realized by courts through these interpretations, which may now be treated as passé because we've seen it all happening. But when it didn't happen, that was the time when it was a defining moment for the court to decide all of it. The right of a woman over a body is something that we talk of, but we don't realize that there are so many other things that a woman is deprived of. And another important aspect I'd like to highlight was that in many of these important matters, it were not women judges who have interpreted these laws.
Yeah.
They have been male judges who have given these expansive definitions. Therefore, to say that it is, you can make it a vertical of women, no. It is men who have interpreted these laws broadly enough to make sure that those rights are recognized in every which way. There are very few, perhaps Bishaka would be one where there was a woman judge, but then mostly you will find that there are male judges. And I, sitting with my colleagues from time to time, whether it was in Delhi High Court, whether it was in Telangana or the Supreme Court, have found that there are such amazing interpretations that men can give and are willing to give that larger right to women which they have been deprived of.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. It is incumbent on us to also recognize the fact that the doors that you spoke of being opened were also opened because of the interpretation of the law, and it was done by men. So we do need to acknowledge that as well. But on that point, there's also this aspect of this casual sexism that we've seen, whether it's actual judicial orders or observations that have happened in courts across the country. In fact, the Supreme Court now has a gender sensitization handbook that's been put out to prevent that from happening. Has it disappointed you? Does it continue to disappoint you? Do you cringe when you hear some remarks that have been made in court?
One of the conundrums that many of the lawyers find when there is a woman judge who's presiding over a bench is how to address the court. So there is a male with you, and you are the woman presiding judge. So they are always in a flux as to decide to address you as my lady, my lord, or ladyship, or whatever else, or ma'am. So though many people think that, we are insisting that we must be addressed as my lord, that's not so. It is just that it is so inbuilt in the legal profession to step into the court and address the court as my lord, that even if you would stop them, many times it is a pause in the course of an argument to stop and say my lord and think and then address you and again add a my lord. So it goes back to back because that gives you that breathing space. That's not because we have said it, it comes naturally. And you don't want to stop somebody midways to say, okay, stop saying my lord or my lady. It can kind of detract them.
Yeah.
To me, as a woman, it doesn't matter how you address me. As long as you're prepared, you're willing to deal with the matter, you come up with arguments that make sense for enabling us to deliver a judgment. But yes, that hesitation on how to address the court as a my lord with a male sitting next to me can be many times quite funny, though we smile and let it pass. And those are moments sometimes which can be quite hilarious in court, but then it's par for the course. It's all good in a day, I guess.
It is par for the course. Let me end by asking the both of you, to young women lawyers who are watching, to young women who are looking at you and to your journeys, what's the single piece of advice that you would leave them with? Justice Kohli, I'll start by asking you.
I would say pick up every gauntlet that is thrown your way. Pick it up, accept the challenge, take it on, heads on, and see where it takes you. If you don't pick up that gauntlet, then the next one won't be there for you. If you pick it up and you don't succeed, you're richer by the experience, and that counts. So each time, we were told by our seniors, you don't succeed in a matter. And you can't succeed in all matters. Some matters are such that you know that you will lose. But the experience that you carry with that matter comes to good use in the next matter. So be there, present yourself at the right time, and be ready. Never be underprepared in court. Always be there, full time there. When you're there as a lawyer and nothing else. Nothing else means focus, it is between you and the court then. If you take that up each time, those experiences will enrich you enough to be able to accept larger and better challenges and succeed each time.
Yes, Geeta?
I would second that, and I think that hard work and perseverance is something which is very important, because this profession you can do well by being peripherally good, but if you really want to know the basics, the profession is so large. The amount of learning that you have to do is so much, and to get the fundamental right. For example, there are many countries, unlike India, where you can't enter the Supreme Court directly. You have to be working at the district courts, doing cross-examination, doing evidence, facing every day's trial before you move up. Now, many people, because it's glamorous to be in Supreme Court, it's glamorous to be doing appellate work, many people want to go there straight. It's not a bad idea. But all I say to every youngster is, please be hardworking. Do not get overawed by the profession. And remember, get your fundamental right. So first pick up books. Don't just go online and try and see. Ultimately, we have ChatGPT, we have AI tools. But don't just do that. Look at the book first. Then do whatever you like. At least you'll know the fundamentals.
Justice Kohli, we've got a Chief Justice of India, albeit for a very short period of time, but we will have a woman's Chief Justice of India. I'll end by asking you, I mean, do you believe that that's likely to make a significant impact in changing the course of women through the judicial system, or do you believe that it will be symbolic only because the tenure is so short?
Well, we all know that the tenure is short, and there's nothing one can do about it. But the fact is, that's opening another very important door that has remained shut now, more than 75 years of independence, and 9, or now, if you included the other two, 11 women in the Supreme Court, doesn't say much about gender representation, if I may say so. So the very fact that finally, after a couple of years, we'll have a lady judge who will be able to be addressed as the Chief Justice of India is a big thing. It opens a door. But what can one achieve if I would step into those shoes for 36 days? Isn't it a challenge? Yeah. Who can implement the dreams one has of making the institution stronger, more vibrant in maybe 25 working days? It remains a challenge, except that it is important for the world to know that India has arrived in the sense we will finally have a woman Chief Justice.
Yes.
And maybe there'll be many more who may have 3 years, 6 months. This is 36 days. It could be 3 years, 6 months. I look forward to that day.
As do all of us, but we'll take the fact that we will finally have a woman at the helm, at the Supreme Court, as the Chief Justice of India. Justice Hema Kohli, Geeta Luthra, thank you so very much for joining us here on Shri Shakti. Appreciate your time, and thank you very much for your insights. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for our fabulous panelists here this evening, giving us a wonderful insight into the workings of the Indian judiciary.